y'all. Hey guys, I've missed you. How you doing? You know what? Normally I come up on here and I'm like, oh, I gotta take a responsibility. I haven't been here in a long time, blah, blah, blah. But how about this time we just hop right into the topic? How about we just skip all that and just go right on in? So what are we talking about today? Today the topic is soul ties. Soul ties. Soul ties. I am sure that some of you guys who have listened to various relationship topics, whether they're talking about it on some type of a podcast, on TV, wherever, you might have heard of soul ties. If you were in the church and you heard somebody preaching about how you should not have sex before marriage, more than likely you have heard about the soul tie. But even though you've heard about it, there are questions. What exactly is a soul tie? What is the definition? What do I look out for? Am I in the grips of it? So what I'm going to do for this podcast is basically just give you a very brief, and baby, I said brief, a very brief definition of what a soul tie is, what to look out for, and just some suggestions basically to do if you find yourself in this type of situation. So, soul tie, definition. A phrase that some people use to refer to a close or intimate spiritual connection between two people. Now, in some cases, this can happen after being physically intimate, but this is where the soul tie can get very, very tricky. These ties can also form after an intensely close spiritual connection with no physical contact. So just when you thought that you was in the clear because this relationship that you had with that particular person was not physical because you guys didn't go there and you thought you were safe, the soul tie, in a soul tie relationship, you are not safe because you do not even have to be physically intimate in order for this type of relationship to occur. Now, the soul tie is not love. Though it may feel like it, it is actually a bond. The difference between love and a bond is that love has limits. It has boundaries, but a bond is indestructible. A visual example that I can give you of a bond is literally taking two individual items. Let's say you have two cars at your house right now. If you were to take those two individual cars and bond them together, each of those cars would fuse into one car, never able to be those two individual cars again. Once those two cars have been bonded, they cannot come apart. So that's how strong a bond is. That strength of a bond and the fact that there are no limits on it is why it is difficult for a person to free themselves from the bond the soul tie has created. Okay. So let me give you a few facts. As we've touched on before, soul ties are not about sex. However, if you find yourself physically, intimately involved with that person, it can strengthen and enhance that tie very drastically. Now, there's also a chemical in our brain that some may have heard of before, but the chemical is called oxytocin. When oxytocin is released in the brain, it promotes attachment. In a normal situation, this chemical is released during sex or intimate moments with your partner. But this chemical is also known to be released throughout the relationship of the soul tie. So it can be very, very dangerous. Can you imagine not being physically intimate with a person, however your brain, the chemical in your brain, oxytocin, is basically telling you, your body and your mind and your heart, that you are physically intimate with that person. So basically how you are feeling towards that person is almost intimate without being physically intimate. And that's why it is very dangerous and you have to be very careful. Now, when your churchy friend says, oh, the enemy is making me do this. They're making me be in the relationship with this person. I don't want to do it. It's just the enemy making me do it. It might be true. Maybe the enemy might be making them do it. However, there is also a scientific component that shows a chemical dependence that we can create actually in our brain towards a person. Now, I was reading an article that explained that the Christian church speaks a lot that an actual soul tie is when you have sex before marriage. This, as I've already defined to you what a soul tie is incorrect. And it gives people an improper view on what a soul tie actually is. Another thing that the church tends to do, according to this article, is over-spiritualize a normal sexual feeling and then define that sexual feeling as a soul tie, which is also not accurate. And this can be very, very dangerous because the people that really need help in getting set free from a soul tie are now getting mixed up with normal physical reactions to the opposite sex. When the church does not want a person to get mixed up in quote-unquote unholy practices, they sometimes will say things to promote fear so that you will not do it. This is wrong. We must begin arming Christians with true knowledge so that sound decisions can be made by the individual and not out of fear. Stop making me do things because I'm scared and start giving me the knowledge so that I can make the proper decision to not do it. So question, how do you get in this position? How you get up in here? How we get here? How do you find yourself in the grips of a soul tie? If indeed you see that, hey, you know what? There might be some warning signs. I think I might be in the grips of this thing. I don't even know how I got here. What is it? What do I do? While researching and hearing stories about soul tie relationships from others and how they've dealt with the soul tie, I have noticed the most common reason many find themselves unknowingly in this type of relationship is through trouble and adversity. Trouble and adversity? Girl, what you talking about? Trouble and adversity. How you find yourself in a relationship through trouble and adversity? Well, allow me to give you an example. So, this is the example. You meet a person, let's say at a comedy club. You at the comedy club, let's keep it light, let's keep it nice. You at the comedy club, enjoying yourself. So you see this person, and you and this person, you meet them by the bathroom at the intermission of the show. Because we all know that the bathroom line at intermission of any show is very long. So you guys are both waiting in the bathroom line, and you start having very light conversation while you're waiting. And within that conversation, you guys both somehow realize you both have lost your mothers due to COVID complications. So now the conversation done got personal. The conversation begins to intensify because you have never spoken to someone who understands the exact pain you are going through at this stage in your life. In that moment, it feels like that person is the only one in the world that truly understands, and God must have sent this person to help you through this grief that many don't understand. I mean, what are the chances of you two meeting like this and having so much in common? The brain automatically thinks this person must be heaven sent. Sometimes knowingly or unknowingly, we tell ourselves what we want to hear to make ourselves feel better. The reality is that everyone that you have something in common with that most others do not share does not automatically make them your next husband or wife. It could be true that you took meeting this random person too seriously, and you should have left that conversation at the bathroom line and not pursued it any further. It is also possible that that quote-unquote perfect person that you just met could be lying or manipulating you. But it's so hard to see clearly through rose-tinted windows. This example, it shows how sometimes trials and tribulations that we face personally in our lives can put us at risk for attracting a soul tie. It's that desperate need for acceptance and validation that gets intensified when you're going through personal struggles in your life. Now, does this mean to not ever speak to people randomly in line? No, it does not. You can go ahead, speak to them, talk to them, get to know them. But when you are in conversation with new people, it is important to have control over your thoughts, feelings, and emotions, and enter into new conversation knowing who you are, rather than desperately searching for someone to complete you. People that fall into this bond tend to be very defensive around others that question aspects of their relationship. Let me give you another example so you can see that one as well. Someone close to you, they continue to question things that you may say or do for the soul tie, this person, this obsession in your life. They might question you. Your friend might ask you questions. It might be the way that you speak, the way that your friend sees how you speak to the soul tie, or how your disposition changes when you speak to them or when you're around them. You may defensively say to your friend, well, we're just friends. Then go on this mini tangent about why you're just friends. Now, you can self-evaluate and you can see if you do that. We're all guilty of going into the mini tangent. But in this particular example, we're talking about the soul tie. Sometimes when you don't know you're in a soul tie, you get very defensive of that particular relationship. So that's a good way to also evaluate that person in your life. Now, there's some important things that I think you should keep in mind. So I'm going to mention them. There is a difference between knowing someone well and a soul tie. Example, one of my boys growing up, actually a lot of my boys growing up, because I was the kind of person that was kind of a tomboy growing up. So I had boys, I always had more guy friends than girlfriends. I'm that type of girl, or that type of woman. I'm sorry. I'm that type of woman. But one of my boys growing up, we are really, really close. We're so close that I know what he's thinking. I know what his facial expressions mean before he opens his mouth. I can anticipate what he's going to say, and I can even sometimes finish his sentences. He is my close friend, not a soul tie. While I care for him, he is not someone that I cannot function with if he were to leave my life. If he were to have an argument where we don't speak for a while, and I would be sad and I would miss him. But with a soul tie, you feel like you cannot live without them. So it's a big difference. When you're going through that argument and maybe you're upset and you're thinking about how you're mad at that person, that's one thing. You can still get up, you can eat, sleep, you can still go to work, handle your responsibility with your children, whatever. When you're dealing with a soul tie, it's not like that. So that's a very big difference between having a close friend, someone that you have a close relationship with, that's a friendship, and a soul tie. It's going to be two different types of feelings when it comes down to when you function in your everyday life. Now, with the soul tie, they can be described as your addiction. And I think I might have said it a little bit earlier. They are definitely your addiction. Everything you do in your everyday life will somehow point back to your tie. An example, you can't go throughout your day without thinking about them. You're texting them throughout your day, regardless of what you're doing. Sometimes you're staying on the phone for unhealthy amounts of time to the point where you're ignoring your other responsibilities. When you encounter arguments with your tie, as I was stating earlier, you may go through bouts of extreme depression and anxiety. You might be unable to perform your normal tasks because your mind is consumed with the state of your relationship with your addiction, your tie. It can affect everything, your sleep, how you eat, even your close relationships with your family and your friends. Now, one final fact that I wanted to mention is that a soul tie is a perfect situation. When I tell you perfect, a perfect, A1, 100% perfect situation for a narcissist. Everyone's talking about the narcissist, but we will be going into narcissist relationships, narcissistic abuse, both within your family and within your intimate relationships in another podcast. Baby, we gonna go there because it's very important that you understand the correct definition of a narcissist and not think that every single thing is narcissistic abuse. Every single thing that a person does is because of the fact that they're